Moshi Moshi.
Hello,
I'm Zeb Ramsbotham,
and I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
and we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't, and I can't wait for Zeb to tell you how he did on his race.
Well, I didn't know you were that excited about it.
Yeah, get ready, listeners. Okay, but first, this week we're going to talk about Zeb's bike race, of course, the Kiso area in general, and my ride around Lake Suwa, visiting a Showa era museum in Takayama, some really cute cat trading cards that we got, and some Lawson Mt Fuji drama.
Yeah, and I guess first we can start out by saying that we're actually going to take a brief hiatus, not from the podcast, from videoing the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it was like a lot of work, and I guess we don't get as much enjoyment out of the video aspect.
Yeah, I prefer the audio medium, so we're going back to that for a bit. We're not going to take the podcast videos down or anything, but if you are like, why are there no YouTube videos? It's because I'm lazy.
Yeah, and if you're like, where can I listen to the podcast? Sorry, because this one's not going to be on YouTube, so we can't tell you. But
What do you mean? You can listen to the podcast anywhere you get podcasts.
no, I'm saying the people that would normally watch it on YouTube are going to be like, did they die? Where'd they go?
Oh, yeah.
We're still doing it.
It's a mystery.
Just not the video. I know my mom, I think, like watching it on YouTube because she likes seeing us.
Oh.
But she's the only one that ever talked about it.
We'll just FaceTime her more often.
Yeah.
But anyway, this week, your race, your Ontake hill climb that you've been preparing for a while.
Yeah.
Let's hear the race report.
Where
Where to begin?
It was a huge relief because I was second
Yeah.
in my class.
Second.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was good. It was definitely, it was kind of funny because I guess just to set it up, I mean, I guess this is something I've been really preparing for since kind of like November or December. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, I actually wrote a blog article about what I talk about when I talk about cycling. And it's on our website, and I sent it out in the last newsletter. So if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, you can also do that on our website. Or,
RamblingRamsBothams.com.
yeah, read some of my rambling writing about what I'm doing when I'm on my bike.
Zeb's a good writer. He likes writing.
Sometimes. So yeah, basically last year I did this hill climb in 2023, and it was really fun. It was the first kind of event like that I've done, and I really enjoyed it. And at some point in like late 2023, so November or December, I guess I realized that I didn't really have any goals for the next year. I knew I wasn't going to do the Japan Pro Tour team, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And that's kind of when it hit me where I was like, well, I could make my goal to go back to Ontake, and I kind of gave myself like 3 goals of increasing difficulty. So maybe I can meet one goal and then feel good about myself instead of feeling like a failure.
Wow. Well, I don't think you feel like a failure.
So my goals of kind of like increasing difficulty, it was one, I wanted to see if I could set my 1 hour power PR. So kind of the highest power I can sustain, which is measured by a little device that cyclists use on their bikes. So that was like a big goal to do that, to beat my time from 2023. So it was kind of like nice. So it was like benchmarking against myself. And then, of course, because it is a race and it's a mass start event, there are going to be other people there. So I figured, it'd be fun to try and finish on the podium. So that was like the most difficult aspect of the race, because the first 2 goals I can kind of control in my preparedness.
Yeah, we were talking about this like the night before your race. I was trying to, I don't know, just see how you were feeling, because you don't get nervous about pre-races the same way I do.
Yeah, just emotionless. There was nothing.
That's not what I mean, but I was just kind of like, what are your goals for tomorrow? And it was interesting because you were like, I think the best I'm going to be realistically able to do is 3rd or 4th, because the guy that had beat you the race before, like last month, he was returning. And then the guy who flatted, and you beat him only because he flatted, he was returning, but he's historically been stronger than you. And then there was some other defending champion guy. So,
well, at Ibukiyama I was 3rd.
Yeah.
So I figured maybe the 2 guys that had beat me at Ibukiyama could beat me again, realistically. So I could be 3rd again. And then there was the really fast guy that flatted. So I was like, well, hopefully for him, he doesn't get a flat tire.
Well, yeah,
again.
That's always unfortunate.
So I kind of knew that there were 3 people out there that I knew could potentially be faster.
Okay, so
than
fast
me.
forward to the day of the race and you guys are like mass starting. What is it like when they are like, okay, go? Is everybody just like off the gun, just sprint? Or, I
Yeah,
assume
pretty
that,
much.
really? You don't
Yeah.
have your like set power for the hour and you're like, nope, I'm just going to hold it at 300 watts exactly for 60 minutes.
No, no one does that.
Oh.
I did that last year at Ontake, and I kind of did that at Abukiyama because I guess that was my fallback strategy, is I know what power I can theoretically hold for 1 hour. And there aren't many opportunities, so this is a quick aside, but basically when we're talking about power, we're talking about the wattage that you're producing, and we know our theoretical hour power because you do a 20-minute test, which is much easier to do in the real world, and you take this number you get and you multiply it by, some people say 90%, some people say 95%. It kind of depends on the athlete. I use 95%. So you take this number of power that you can hold for 20 minutes, multiply by 95%, and theoretically that's your like maximum power you can hold for 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew my like theoretical max, but you don't really get many opportunities in the real world to test that because you're usually not riding as hard as you possibly can for an hour.
Yeah, it's also pretty hard to have the discipline to do that, I think.
Yeah, it's
Unless
hard to
you're,
pace yourself.
like in a race situation and there's also like endorphins and excitement and like, I'm trying to beat everybody.
I guess so, yeah.
So you guys go off the front in a group and then how does it split up?
So it's a weird situation because I was racing an E1 and last year there was no Japan Pro Tour like event for this race. So this year there was, and theoretically the Japan Pro Tour guys are supposed to be much faster than us.
Mm-hmm.
So they started in front of us. And I guess, a lot of the E1 guys could be racing in the JPT level, but it's just kind of like a little bit more commitment. It's a little more serious. So a lot of them just hang out in E1. So
both fields are pretty competitive.
Yeah,
but technically
and
the JPT is pro.
Technically. And it's like the 10 to 15 top E1 guys can ride with or beat the JPT guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they knew that. And the JPT guys started only a minute in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there probably were about 10 to 20 guys that were like, well, we'll just catch the JPT field.
It's a good motivator, I guess.
And then ride with them. So kind of like right from the gun, it was really hard because I think people realized like
they're all trying to catch the people that went.
Yeah, they were like, well, we'll just catch the Japan Pro Tour guys. And so that's what we did. And so kind of right from the gun, it was really hard. And kind of looking at my power data, you can see this like big spike. And then it was really hard until we caught the Japan Pro Tour guys. And then it was kind of chaotic because it was that situation where, well, I bridged to this group with maybe 10 or 15 guys. And they're the only ones I'm racing against because they're in my category. So they're the only ones I care about. But now all of a sudden I'm riding up this mountain with a group of like 70 guys who aren't in my category and I'm not racing against, but we're interfering with each other and each other's races.
I guess you could help, like it could help you, but it also maybe would like block you from getting around a big group of people and then getting to the people that actually matter in your standings.
Yeah, and for me it was kind of frustrating because I had the goal of setting my hour power. So I was pretty committed to treating the event kind of like a time trial, and I just wanted to ride as hard as I possibly could for an hour. And I think that's one of my strengths as a cyclist is I'm pretty good at riding at my threshold or my theoretical hour power, and I'm good at pacing that effort. And so I was like, well, that's what I want to do. But the other guys were kind of treating it essentially like an hour-long uphill criterium where they were setting, like a reasonable pace, but then they were attacking each other. So they would have these crazy, surges and spikes in power, but then they would like fall back to kind of like a pretty pedestrian pace.
I guess that's also a strategy though, because the hill is not a consistent grade the whole way up. There's like flat spots and bits that you could draft off of people. So if you stayed in a group...
This one didn't really have any of that. This one was pretty consistently uphill the entire way.
There was no reason to stay in a group to get any draft benefits?
Not really, because it was so slow because the grade, it was like a 7% average grade for an hour. That's a pretty steep climb. And to draft, I mean, you need to be going at least
13 miles per
13
hour.
miles an hour. And I think we averaged like 10.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that
we
makes
were
sense.
usually not benefiting from that. So it was annoying for me because I wanted to ride at the pace I wanted to ride, but people would like,
What kept you from just like going around those people?
well, I would, and then they would do their like little surgy attacks,
Oh.
and then like a little pocket of people would like ride in front of me, but then they would all sit up to look around for the next little attack.
Oh.
And then when they sat up, they were going significantly slower. So it was like this weird,
They probably didn't really think, anything of it. Like they're just kind of attacking whatever's in front.
and they probably also didn't think that I could hold that pace
They
for
didn't
an
think
hour.
I could hold it. Well,
Yeah,
you did though, and then
I did.
I guess maybe 3/4 of the way up, did you realize like, oh, I'm in the standings for
No,
like,
I never
top?
knew, because at one point some people did attack, and then the group essentially kind of like blew up, and there were little pockets of people, because some people then they would ride super hard, and I knew that they were probably riding at a power that if I followed them I could probably sustain it for like 20 minutes, but then that would leave me 20 minutes from the top of the climb, and I would be cooked.
Yeah.
So
you
I
wouldn't have
needed to
anything
not
left.
follow them. So these like little groups of people would kind of go away, and then I would start catching them as the climb went on. But I didn't really know how many groups were up the road, and I didn't know how many people in those groups were in my category.
Yeah.
So I never really knew what position I was in. But yeah, I just kept riding and like kind of kept my pace. And it was really around near the end, it was like 2 kilometers to go. There was a pocket of people I caught, and there was one E1 guy, like my category. There's one guy from my category in that group.
So you have to beat him.
So I knew that he was there, and I knew we were like 2K to go. So it's like getting pretty close. And then I kept riding my pace, and that kind of group got on my wheel. And at that point, it's funny because they're blown up because they've been riding so hard.
Because
So-
they tried to surge ahead and break away.
Yeah, and my pace was hard enough for them that they could kind of hang on my wheel, but it's fun when you pass people and you hear them like breathing so hard. Like you can just tell
Yeah.
that they just destroyed themselves.
I know.
and
I've
they're-
been like both riders in that situation. Like I've been dying and getting past, and I've also been
Yeah.
like the passee, and it does give you like an extra boost when you're like you're also tired, but the fact that you have a little bit left makes you feel that much better.
it made me
in
feel
some
better,
ways.
but in some instances it made me feel worse
Why?
because some of the people I would catch, they would turn themselves inside out to try and stay on my wheel because I guess they thought maybe I would blow up. So they're like, oh, I need to ride with that guy.
Yeah, I mean that's admirable.
But they would be breathing so hard. It was like messing up my internal
Yeah.
rhythm because I couldn't hear myself breathing.
Oh,
I could
yeah.
hear them breathing. And it would make me almost breathe even harder because I could only hear them.
You're making me remember, I didn't race road very much, but in college I raced road nationals once in Colorado, and I was in this group. We were trying to pace line, and this one girl was just trying to like ride through because she was breathing so hard. Like I thought she was going to have an asthma attack. Like she was
Yeah.
like wheezing, breathing. And I was like kind of impressed that she was continuing to put out like the same power, but like also like, are you good? Like, it's not worth it. Like, it's just a bike race.
That's how I feel with some of the people I was passing, especially near the end, because they
Wow.
were truly...
People that can dig that
Like-
deep is, like, impressive but scary.
Yeah, that's how I feel because it's a strength and a weakness of mine that I'm really good at pacing myself, but I also have a really good internal like rev limiter that I can't really ride that long, that high over my threshold because my body is just kind of like, we can't do it. So when I hear people breathing like that, it kind of freaks me out because
Yeah.
one, I can't really do that. And so that was kind of like unsettling occasionally because I would catch people that were. And then the fact that they
Trying
were
really hard.
yeah, because they were already breathing that hard, and then when I caught them, they like dug even deeper because they were like, I gotta
Dang.
stick with that guy, and then they're just gasping. And also, we did ride to altitude. We rode over 2,000 meters, so over 6,000 feet.
I guess
And,
that's barely altitude, but yeah.
I mean, once you hit 5,000, we used to climb a beach, and I feel like towards the top of beach, I could
I
kind
guess
of tell
technically.
it's getting a little thin, and so
if we have any, like, Colorado people listening, they're, like, laughing right now.
maybe, but 3,000 feet is the technical limit, like where the floor begins, where you can start getting some
Technically.
how do you say it?
Acclimation?
Yeah, acclimation at 3,000 feet. So we were like twice that.
All right, so then what happened?
So
you
then
said that
after
you
all this,
finished in a sprint. So
yeah, because I got to like 500 meters to go, and I realized that one of the guys up the road was also an E1 rider, and I was like, well, dang, we're like within.
Gotta get him too.
Yeah, I was like, we're within 1 kilometer to go, and it's funny because people, their strategy kind of goes out the window, or maybe they didn't have a strategy, because I was, to a certain extent, always riding within myself.
Well, and when you start getting tired, you start having to throw the strategy out.
I guess. So
Sometimes.
this group that I was with, even though I was riding the exact same pace, once we kind of got maybe around like 600 meters to go, they kind of started attacking each other, and they started trying to ramp up the pace. Mm-hmm. And at that point I realized I have 2 E1 guys with me in my category.
Yeah, you have to beat them.
I have to beat them, and it's only 600 meters to go. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of went to the back of that little group, and I was like, well, whatever happens, I'll stick with this group. And then I knew from last year kind of the finish of the climb. And so right around like 350 meters to go, I knew that I was about to see the cones
Does
that
it
lead
kick
to the
up
finish.
at the end, or is it more
Kind
of like a
of.
flat?
No, it's like uphill significantly. I looked at the last 500-ish meters on my like data, and it's like a 9% grade, so it's pretty steep.
The last few hundred meters of races gets me like, you get the little butterflies in your stomach because, you know, everybody's kind of like looking around and like kind of feeling like, how much do I actually have on my legs? Like, when should I just like put the rest out there?
Yeah, I
You
felt...
don't want to go too early.
Yeah, for me, I felt confident because at this point, I was like the only one that was not gasping. Like everyone around me is just so...
Well,
like,
then it's kind of fun when you decide, like, okay, now I'm going to sprint, and then
yeah,
you just, like, go.
And I could tell that I could tell that they were actually accelerating as if they wanted to drop people, but it wasn't that hard.
It wasn't like a committed, like,
no,
sprint.
they were committed, but for me, it was, like, not that difficult.
Oh,
so that's kind of when I felt
difficult.
pretty good. And so with, like, 350 meters to go, that's when I started my sprint. And... yeah, beat them.
That's exciting.
But then I still had no idea because there was the other E1 guy.
You just knew you beat those 2 E1 guys.
Yeah, so I had no idea where I placed. And I crossed the finish line. And that's probably the closest I felt in a long time to like throwing up after riding. I made the mistake. I don't know why I did it, but I drank some of my like drink kind of in the last like kilometer. I don't know why I did that.
Did you just like panic?
I don't know. It was just like, well, I sprayed a bunch of it out. And then I was
Why?
like, because it's weight. It's heavy. Okay. So I'd like sprayed a bunch out, and then I took a little sip. I probably didn't need that sip.
Just to like, if your throat's dry, because you've been breathing.
Yeah. But yeah, so I had no idea how I placed, and thankfully I had like a teammate there at the finish line, and he looked it up on his phone, and he was like, you were second.
Must have been a great feeling.
It was really good.
Yeah. I remember I was biking. I was just doing a ride around, like at the base, just tooling around, because I couldn't see your finish. I guess I could have driven up to the top at some point before you guys all started, but of course the road's closed once it starts. Yeah. So I couldn't get up to the finish and stuff. So I was waiting for your text, and then when I saw you got second, I was very excited.
Wow, yeah, it was a really good feeling, and it was just really nice to finish. And then first place was kind of like long gone. I think he finished like 2 minutes in front of me, which is crazy.
So impressive.
Yeah, and because he finished in just under 50 minutes. He finished in like 49 minutes and 34 seconds, and I finished in 51 minutes, like 34 seconds. Well. So it was 2 minutes and 40 seconds faster than my time from 2023.
That's cool.
So I checked the box on that goal to beat myself from the previous year.
That's good. It's like the only goal that really matters.
Yeah, I didn't set my hour PR. Yeah. But then I did finish on the podium. Yeah. So really those were like finishing on the podium was really the main goal. But I kind of had these like other goals kind of just in case to make myself feel good.
Well, also backup goals. The podium is like the most fun goal, but you can't really decide who's going to show up from the time before. You know, like it could be some completely new riders that are like way faster than last year, and you can't really control that. Yeah, the guy that was
third behind me was new.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
well,
yeah, it was just a really good day.
That's good. The mountain Ontake, we went last year, so we did kind of talk about it, but it was kind of scary to be back again because it's an active volcano. And,
I don't know if active is the right, or it's a volcano that potentially could erupt,
yeah,
but it's not in the process of erupting
that's
right
true.
now.
I don't know what the right term is, but
It's not dormant, that's for sure.
Because I think, wasn't it like 2014? It
Yeah, the
killed
last
people.
big eruption was 2014, and a good amount of people died.
Because it was kind of a surprise. People were just hiking and it
That's
and it
the
erupted.
issue with Ontake, is apparently there's some kind of geological action going on there where it's like a bit of a loose trigger that a lot of volcanoes kind of have these seismic warnings so they can
Tell
know
people to
that
go.
an eruption's coming. But apparently Ontake, when it erupted in 2014, there was like zero warning.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
So that was in the back of my mind because I didn't know that until we were already off the mountain and leaving last year. And so this year I knew that. And so I was kind of like, well, you know, it's probably going to be fine because it probably is. And people live there. But yeah, so I was biking around Otake village at the base of Ontake, which is kind of confusing. Otake. Anyway, so people live there, but I don't know if it's just because it's kind of an old village and they've just always lived there and so they're not going to move now because it's pretty remote. But the way that I rode this time, I didn't ride towards Kiso Valley and towards the river. I rode deeper into the woods because on Strava, there's a way you can look on Strava. I guess if any cyclists are listening, they know this already, but you can see heat maps basically. And so the color of the roads is darker based on how many people have ridden and uploaded rides on those roads. And there was a ton of dark blue roads in the woods. So I was like, well, I'll go over there and see. But then I realized that it's because they had a mountain bike race in that area, like almost 10 years ago at this point. Or maybe not 10 years ago.
But people must still ride it recently.
It hasn't.
The heat map fades
Oh,
over time.
okay. It must have been like 5 years ago. They don't have the mountain bike race that I could tell because I would have wanted to do that this year. But the roads, it's gravel roads back there. So I didn't feel comfortable riding it on my road bike because I didn't have the right tires and there was no cell signal in case I did like
and she has a broken spoke and
yeah.
some other issues going on.
So I didn't go on any of the gravel roads, unfortunately, but it was really cool back there and very remote. There was a little spooky section where there's a lake that has been formed by a 1984 earthquake because it caused a landslide. And so like a bunch of the mountain just slid off and I guess it dammed up a river or something enough to create this lake now.
I guess so, and you can still see it when you're at the summit where the race finishes. So it's kind of weird. The race finishes. Sometimes you see the mountain called Mitake, and I think it's because there are 3 peaks. So I finished on one of the peaks, but from where I finished, you can like look across at what I think is Ontake, which is the big mountain, and you can see it's this crazy, just massive chunk of the mountain that is clearly fallen away. And so it's crazy being at that distance and looking at it and realizing how much land used to be there and it went somewhere and it's just all gone.
They went down to Otake Village because that's where I was biking around and it's beautiful back there. Maybe it's just because I grew up in Appalachia and so I guess I'm more attuned to what that nature looks like, but a lot of Japan reminds me of the Appalachian Mountains and it felt very like Appalachia back there, especially because there was like some old railroad roads and like just a ton of rhododendron type greenery and very dense forest.
Yeah, they're much like azaleas and mountain laurel-ish.
But there were a bunch of places where the road would go and then there would be signs of a landslide and they'd had to build a new road around it. And so I kept riding deeper and then there's a village even farther back that honestly I don't know what's life like back there. Like they had signs for a restaurant but the restaurant was closed. Like when I got there it didn't look like it had been open for a long time.
It's just got to be super backcountry rural.
Well, and like I do understand the appeal. I grew up really rural. We had to drive 30 minutes to like the grocery store or school and it's fun and nice, but
you got to think about those people. They probably have to drive at least an hour.
I know because they were like a 30-minute drive from the rural village.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is really back here.
Which is like a 30-minute drive from the closest convenience store.
Yeah.
Which is like an hour drive from the closest supermarket.
But if you're in the like Mount Ontake area and you bring your gravel bike, those gravel roads did look really fun. I didn't have the right bike for it, but I biked all the way out there. And then the reason I turned around, I was going to do an out and back anyway, but at first I was like, oh, it's still paved. Like, maybe I'll just keep going. And on this road, not all the roads were paved, but one was. But then I turned around because there was actually so much animal poop that I was like a little bit afraid that I was going to run into an animal. I didn't know what kind of animal it came from, but it was like...
Probably a monkey.
Probably a monkey. There had been so many like bear warning signs though, and I was like, that doesn't look like bear poop, but like I don't know what Japanese bear poop looks like.
Yeah.
And it was so much that it was like, at first I was like, oh wow, that's like fresh animal poop, and then I was like, there's more. There was like 10 little animal poop piles like a yard away from each.
Bunch of monkeys.
I know, I was like, holy cow, either an animal had like a bad day or like there's a lot of animals back here.
Also, to put it into perspective, we had friends from Australia visiting, and I can't remember the exact number, but they said something like 3 people in Australia last year got killed by sharks. Mm-hmm. And recently there was another news article that was kind of a recap on the 2023 bear season to try and warn people about 2024. And in 2023, it was something like 260 people in Japan got attacked by bears.
Yeah, it's scary.
That's a lot of people.
I know.
It's a pretty absurd number when you think about it.
Yeah, I was not afraid of bears. Like in America, I mean, we have brown bears and black bears, but on the East Coast, the black bears are like pretty harmless. I mean, you're not going to want to go close to one. You're definitely not want to get between a mom and the cubs. But like, for the most part, they're not going to come after you, especially if you spook them. Mm-hmm. They'll run away. It's apparently the opposite in Japan, and even so much as like you could just be doing your own thing and they'll like find you.
Yeah, it's like the Asiatic black bear hates people. And you have to imagine...
It's like almost funny, but it's scary.
Also, everyone that lives in these super rural, remote villages where the bears are going to visit, they're all ancient. Mm-hmm. It's all, 80-year-old people out in their gardens.
And they're all out in the woods, like, trying to find, like, herbs and
yeah, because they're looking for
plants.
The same vegetables that the bears are looking for.
Yeah.
So the bear is kind of thinking, well, I'll just take these people out and then I'll get all the mountain vegetables.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so it was beautiful but scary. I guess nature in Japan is like very humbling. It's kind of cool, but it's also like we were out there and I was like, the mountain could erupt, there could be a landslide. I'm biking like next to a lake that just started to exist 40 years ago because of another natural disaster. So, and
we can say that every single time we've been to Nagano, we've seen monkeys.
Yeah.
Every single time.
We saw the cutest baby monkey this time, though. It was so small. It was like the size of a kitten. It was so cute.
It was tiny, but the big monkeys are big. Mm. If we hit one with our car, it'd be bad.
It would be.
Yeah.
So, for multiple reasons, not just because.
It'd mess up our car. We'd have to call somebody, and then we're out in this remote village with monkeys and bears. Yeah. But,
well, so another lake that I rode around this weekend, this is the day before Zeb's bike race. He didn't come with me because he was resting, so he could be prepared. But we were staying in Ina in Nagano, which we'll talk about that in a second. But Lake Suwa, we've been to before on our summer bike tour. We stayed in Matsumoto for kind of a rest day, and because we just wanted to spend more time in Matsumoto. And we took the train to Lake Suwa from Matsumoto because it happened to be the one day a year that
it was their 75th anniversary fireworks festival.
Yeah.
It was the first time they had done it since COVID.
Which is a huge, like...
It was a big deal.
So lucky that we were there the one day that they were doing that.
Was really lucky.
So I'd never seen Lake Suwa in the daytime, and we were nearby, and I don't remember, I feel like somebody told me that there was a bike lane around Lake Suwa, and I didn't really have a plan, so I was like, well, I'll bike out there and see what Lake Suwa's like. The bike lane is incredible. Like, usually I get really, I don't know, kind of bummed when I see that there's been all this money and time put into bike infrastructure, but it's just a sidewalk, so it's not actually comfortable to ride on.
Or it's just totally overgrown, or the pavement's been cracked.
Yeah, it's always a bummer because it's like, yeah, this is what I've been asking for. Like, thank you for caring about bikes and making a dedicated lane, but, like, I don't want to ride on it because it's got all these... when you ride across the sidewalk, it's like bump, 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 and so it's not very
It's like it's significantly worse than just riding on the road.
Right.
So then you end up just riding on the road.
But this wasn't like that at all. This was a whole road lane. It was the size of the road next to it, but just for bikes and directional. And so you could just stay on the left side, and the other bikes would pass you on the right side. And the best part, I don't even know if this is the best part, just another good part is that they had a separate pedestrian like walkway. So you could go as fast as you wanted to go because you weren't like bothering or scaring any pedestrians or being unsafe because you were just in the bike lane. I was so happy about it. It exceeded my expectations.
Which is good because getting there was not ideal.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
So the surrounding area turned out to be, it's pretty dense and densely populated. And I don't know if it's because through the middle of Nagano, there's kind of a main thoroughfare. I guess it's like a river valley. And so there's kind of like congestion because the towns through the middle of Nagano are really linear.
Yeah.
And then because it's so mountainous on the perimeter.
Yeah, there's really only a couple roads to go.
Yeah, you kind of, all the cars get funneled into the same area. So it wasn't as pleasant to ride in.
No.
But if you can go, Nagano just in general is really cool. Almost every time we've been. And so specifically we were staying in this little town. I don't know what you call it.
No, it was a city. It was like a small city of Ina. Because like it was much bigger than just a town. It was pretty bustling at night.
Yeah, but then when you think about like a Japanese person, they'd probably be like, oh, it's pretty rural, isn't it?
No, it was much bigger than Uchinada.
Yeah.
It was closer to Kanazawa, but more spread out.
I don't think, because Matsumoto is half the size of Kanazawa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Matsumoto is only 250,000 people.
Oh, I didn't
So
realize
Ina
that.
itself is probably about the size of Uchinada. But it's kind of more dense. It just had a lot more going on.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it.
There were restaurants open. There were cars driving. People were walking around downtown. There was a downtown. There's no downtown in Uchinada.
It's kind of interesting because you can take a JR line through the center of Nagano Prefecture. So I feel like if you want a taste of kind of rural, but also you really want some beautiful nature, but you kind of want some things to do, but there's not really anything to do.
It's a lot of things.
I don't know. You know, some people want to experience like what life in Japan is really like, but you also still want some fun stuff. I feel like you could go to Ina, or you could go to like any of the places south of Matsumoto.
Really? I would just go to Matsumoto. Just use that as your base.
Well, yeah, but then you could, I would probably stay in Matsumoto, but you could like take the train down to Ina and kind of just like walk around.
I'm surprised you're like saying that Ina's worth visiting. I thought it was
that's
fine,
the thing. I don't
think
it's worth visiting.
Oh.
I just think it's like kind of like Uchinada. Like people come visit Uchinada.
Yeah.
But Ina would be way cooler. It's like why do we see people visiting Uchinada?
I think people visit Uchinada because they're in Kanazawa and then you just take a 15-minute train to see the ocean.
Yeah. So from Matsumoto,
you take a 45-minute train to see the suburbs. I don't know.
Yeah, and get a little taste of rural life in Japan.
Yeah.
And more specifically, you can eat at a really good Peruvian restaurant.
That's the reason you should go.
Yeah. La Casa de Jimmy.
Yeah, which is such a funny name. Casa de Jimmy. But it was delicious Peruvian food. And
it was so good.
Zeb has been to Peru before. I've never been.
Yeah, I've been to Huancayo, which is what the lady had her food named after.
Yeah.
But then she was like, she's like, I haven't been to Huancayo.
Yeah, it was funny because the chef was this Japanese grandma, but her parents, we couldn't really understand. I think her parents are
Japanese, but she was born in Lima. So she grew up in Lima with her parents there. And
at some point she moved back to Japan.
Yeah.
So she is Japanese, but she was like born and raised in Peru.
She's Japanese.
Yeah.
But yeah, she makes really good Peruvian food. And
it was just delicious. So good because I haven't had Peruvian. I don't know if I've ever actually had Peruvian food in general in a long time, like ever, but I haven't had South American Mexican food in a long time. Yeah, we have a Mexican restaurant here in Uchinada, but honestly, the Peruvian restaurant, that was like super good. Like, I know Mexico's not South America, but you know, Latin food, that was a really good restaurant. And they had really good hot sauce. And it was a bummer because I really wanted to eat a bunch of it, but it was the night before the race. You didn't want to blow yourself up.
Yeah, I didn't want to blow myself up, so I had to be really careful. But yeah, it was really good. It was kind of like a nice, and I guess that's why I think it's funny that maybe for someone it would be worth visiting, because we live in Japan and we had such a good time there. So it's kind of weird because there's nothing really there to see. I think we had a good time, but I would go back. It was not as like stereotypical Japanese, you know, not stereotypical Japanese, but like when you go to a country, you want to see the tourist spots because they're tourist spots for a reason. So I think since we've been lucky enough to see a lot of the tourist spots, that's why we liked it, because it was like, oh, this is something different. We haven't had Peruvian food. Yeah, we went to the Don Quixote and La Casa de Jimmy.
Yeah,
It
but I
was-
don't know that I would like say Ina is like a destination, but it was
definitely
I
not a
enjoyed my time
destination.
there.
But if you're passing through,
Yeah.
it could be interesting just to like walk around the streets and see how people are living life.
I guess we're talking about the weekend backwards because we talked about your race on Sunday. Then
That was the
my
most important part.
okay.
That was the only reason we were there.
I mean, it was, yeah. But the race on Sunday, then the Lake Suwa ride and the Peruvian food was Saturday. But on Friday, on our way to Ina, on our way like down to the hotel, we stopped in Takayama and we had
for Annie's birthday part 2.
yeah.
Because we haven't mentioned it yet, but last week was Annie's birthday.
No, we did mention it.
Did we?
We talked about it last week, I think.
Oh, we didn't talk about it in this podcast yet.
No, but Zeb kept making fun of me because he's like, I was like, it's my birthday because for my birthday I
It was
wanted
the day
to
after her birthday.
yeah, I wanted to spend the day together in Takayama for my birthday. And so I kept saying like, oh, let's do this. It's my birthday. And you were like, it's not your birthday.
Well,
It wasn't literally my birthday, but that's what we were doing for my birthday.
okay.
So I had a very good birthday, not birthday, in Takayama. And one of the highlights, so Takayama, I was surprised by this, but it's the biggest city by area in Japan, which is shocking because
Yeah.
it's just this mountain town in Gifu. I wouldn't say it's like a quaint hidden town because people know where Takayama is, but it's a pretty small town.
They've done like a really good job of preserving some historic aspects of the town, and it's very concentrated. So Kanazawa is kind of spread out. So people like the tourists and people that come to Kanazawa kind of end up spread out throughout the city. But Takayama, the sites that you want to see are super dense. So it feels like it's this crazy busy
It was kind of
place.
crowded.
It
yeah.
feels crowded, but there aren't that many people there, but they've done a really good job kind of marketing themselves, not only more internationally, but within Japan. Takayama is kind of a tourist city
Yeah, like
or
internal
town
tourism.
for Japanese people. Yeah, they like to go there. And it's super beautiful.
Yeah, because
it's definitely worth visiting.
they have historic sites from a lot of different eras. So they have like the Hida, like the Gashozukuri style thatched roof houses. They have a whole section, an open air museum where you can go see those. But then all the way up to the Showa era, and we went to go see a museum from that. But for my point about why it's the biggest city, it's the largest city by area because in 2005 they merged with 9 other surrounding like cities and towns to share resources, which we've talked about before, how a lot of times towns will kind of absorb each other to pool resources. And so because of that, the city of Takayama technically, well, it is over 2,000 square kilometers, which is larger than Tokyo, but 92% of it is forest.
Yeah, because technically as soon as we crossed over into Gifu from Nagano, we crossed into Takayama City, but then you spend like an hour and a half driving through the middle of nowhere before you reach anything.
It's something crazy like 82 kilometers long and 52 kilometers like tall, like on a map, the area. But anyway, I explained that weird, but so.
And you can get there easily with a lot of bus tours. So if you come to
Yeah, that's
Kanazawa,
true.
they do bus tours. They go kind of through the Hida Takayama region. And so you can see like Shirakawa-go, you can see Hida, you can see Takayama, and then some of the buses even go on to Matsumoto. So you can kind of do this like cool central Japan bus tourism.
Yeah, I feel like if you wanted to spend the night in Takayama, that'd be a cool thing on the way like to and from between Kanazawa and Matsumoto or something.
Yeah.
So the Showa Museum was probably my favorite thing that we did while we were in Takayama. We had our bikes and we just kind of pedaled around town, and I had a loose route that was going to take us through a bunch of different sites. So when we got there, we rode through the morning market area, which it was like 11 o'clock, wasn't it? I was really surprised it was still
No, I think it was
happening.
earlier than that.
Maybe 10?
Yeah, I think it was a little after 10.
Usually in places, the morning market is truly morning. Like, if you get there at 10:30, things are over.
Yeah, but some of the morning markets are actually kind of more for local people. Like, they're kind of actual, like, little marketplaces.
Yeah,
This was
true.
definitely... It wasn't
They had
a
leaned
bad
into
thing.
the tourism,
Yeah.
which I don't blame them because there's a lot of people.
It was so crowded.
It was really cool to see
Yeah.
that there were just so many people enjoying the area.
And it's really pretty because there's a river that cuts through Takayama, and
Yeah.
the morning market is kind of on the river. So super beautiful, nice to walk around. But yeah, the Showa Museum I thought it would be cool from looking at the pictures, but it was cooler in person.
Yeah, the Showa era is from 1926 to 1989, so it's one of the longest eras in Japanese history, and it's from Emperor Hirohito, and so he was the reigning emperor, and that's how they do eras.
Yeah, it's like the emperor's lifespan, basically like when they become emperor until when they die.
Which is an interesting way to divide things. Instead of just dividing it by trends, they divide it just literally from emperor to emperor.
I know,
but it does make it uneven because the preceding era was the Taisho era, which was only like 19 years because that emperor was really sickly. Like as a boy, he was really sick too. And so apparently he had a really rough life, which is kind of sad.
It's a bummer.
But yeah, the one that was, I mean, I think he was from like 1904 to like 1926, and that's just the Taisho era.
Yeah, and it's important because there are 2 dates in Japan. So when I do a lot of my paperwork at school, I have to write like Reiwa 6.
Oh, yeah.
So I always have to remember, it's Reiwa and it's 6 right now. And so then I write in 6 and then I stamp it. So when they ask for the year, I have to think about like, it's the Reiwa 6. So it's kind of funny. But
I was on a sake tour like on this Takayama day. Zeb didn't come because he's not drinking, and I was just like, I'll just go like look at the sake tour. But anyway, one of the other guests on the tour was like, what's the vintage of this bottle? Because I think they were from like France or Italy or something. And the lady was kind of laughing. She was like, well, we don't really like do that. And also it's an expiration date or something. Cause it was like a Best Buy date, but she was like, and it says like 5, the year was 5 because it was Heisei. It was, Reiwa 5 or something.
Yeah.
And he was really confused, and I was like, oh, yeah.
So you have to do this like mental calculation. But it is interesting because there are a lot of people in Japan that are really nostalgic for the Showa era. And when you say Showa era, there's kind of this image that you get in your head, and really it's the 50s. So I feel like the Showa era is kind of...
The 50s to the 70s, probably.
Yeah, kind of, but I feel like the true, like the nostalgic Showa era that people kind of like pine for, and they're like, oh, the Showa era. Usually you see stuff that looks like the 50s.
Yeah, probably. Like the retro, colorful, like bright ads and like...
Yeah. And it was fun because Japan, was this turning point. Of course, they're coming out of the war. They're like starting to modernize.
The Showa era is so fascinating because they had this intense, like awful imperialism at the beginning of it. And then at the end... they come like full circle and everybody loves Japan. It's fascinating. It's in the same era from like the 20s to the 80s. It's the public opinion of Japan is completely different.
Well, that's why I think it's so interesting, especially because when you talk to the people about the Showa era and they are thinking about a certain image in their heads, it's interesting that they have a specific idea. Because, like, for instance, the Showa Era Museum was very 1950s.
Yeah, because nobody wants to go to a museum about imperialist Japan.
I know, but it was 73 years long.
Yeah.
And it's funny that they essentially pick, like, a decade,
the
50s. And then it's kind of like, well, really, it was up until 1989. So you could be nostalgic about Showa Era, like, almost like Super Nintendo type stuff.
They did have stuff. So they had this whole set that was in there. And you enter, it was only 1,000 yen for each adult. And they had a pachinko section where you didn't have to pay any money. You just like press a button and get the little pachinko balls, and you can play with the pachinko slots. And then you could walk through these streets that they had rebuilt to be kind of in that era.
Annie's favorite part was the doctor's office.
Ugh, that part was scary. It was funny because everything was like, oh, fun, like the 60s. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like Victorian era hospital. Like,
like straps and saws.
Yeah, here's where we'll cut the baby out of you. Like,
it was a little kind of like
spooky. I was like, I'm glad I'm not in this era, apparently, in the doctor. But they had like a cute ramen shop, and upstairs they had a school that they had rebuilt. They had living rooms, like, it was just the room, so you walk in, but
it was like
feels
they'd
you're in an
literally
old
gone into
house.
someone's house and just taken out a room and then plopped it in this museum.
Yeah.
So it was really cool, and you could sit in it, and you could
play the old video games on the
Yeah.
old consoles.
you could hang out. It was a super cool museum.
And then
it was
in
definitely
the-
worth going to.
Yeah. And it's funny because Takayama has 2 museums. So we went to
Yeah.
the Showa museum, but they also had a retro museum, which is kind of the same thing. But I don't know actually what it was like inside because we didn't go. But it seemed cool too.
Yeah, I was sold on the Showa Museum once I saw pictures that there was like this apparent set inside, and you could kind of pretend like you were back in time.
Mm-hmm.
Once I saw that, I was like, oh, I want to go to the Showa one because the set looked really cool. And
Well,
it
when
was.
we were leaving, we bought a bunch of stuff in the gift shop too. They had like retro candies, throwback, I guess, flavors and packaging and
Yeah, people are
candy type
really into
stuff.
Showa era candy.
I am too. It's so interesting because we got like lemon drops and the little metal candy tin that's in the Ghibli movies.
Literally dropsu.
Yeah.
And I think they're licorice.
Well, 2 of the things that were really interesting to me was one is this lemon candy it's in a wrapper, but the wrapper is edible because it's made out of rice paper. And so I don't know why they even wrapped it. I guess to keep them from sticking to each other.
Yeah.
I guess if it got hot, it would stick, but because it's wrapped in rice paper, it's not. So you can unwrap it, or you can just eat the whole thing. And then the other thing was vinegar candy, and it's vinegar kombu, which is kelp. And I had heard of it before, and so I was curious, so I bought it, and I'm just surprised by... I mean, I know it's vinegar, but I'm surprised by how vinegary it smells.
It's literally kind of like vinegar.
You know when you, like, see funny videos of, like, babies trying a lemon for the first time, and, you know, they, like, maybe...
Usually I see those videos, but it's like a dog or something, or like a horse eating a lemon.
Yeah, so it,
I haven't seen a baby licking a lemon. I'll miss those
also,
videos.
like, the baby tries the lemon, and then they make this, like, awful face, and then they, like, want to try it again. That's kind of what the candy is like. Like, you eat it, and you're like, oh, vinegar, and then you're kind of like, okay, I want another one, actually.
I still need to try one, and I hope that I would like it because I really like salt and vinegar chips.
It's totally different.
I know it's totally different, but I like
You'll probably
vinegar.
like it, but
We'll
it's
see.
so strange that it's a concept, but I'm into it.
Yeah, my favorite was the Morinaga milk caramel.
Yeah,
It's
those
really
are...
good caramel.
You can get those at convenience stores, actually.
Really tasty.
Like, even still, you don't have to go to the museum.
No.
The best thing, though, was not edible. It was these Namaneko cards, which are cat trading cards. They're basically, like, funny cards that are themed around cats, and you get a cat license or a cat insurance card or a cat's, like, trading card with their stats.
Yeah. Or you can get, like, a cat Suica card, and it's like Nyan Neko.
Yeah, they had, like, IC cards with the cat, like, passport photos and stuff.
Yeah, it was a really, I guess there was, the story is a photographer found some kittens, and apparently he didn't like cats, but he decided to take care of these kittens, and then he saw one of the kittens playing with a doll's costume, and he was like, oh, it'd be kind of funny to put the cat in a costume. And then according to the website, this popularized the idea of pet costumes worldwide, globally.
Yeah, it's a bold claim.
It is a little bit of a bold claim. But that's what they say. And so he started taking pictures of these kittens in these uniforms, and it kind of like blew up and became super popular. And so there was this kind of craze in the early 80s. I think 1981 to 1983 was like prime time for Namaneko. And yeah, they made all these cards and stuff, and you can collect them.
They're just so goofy. Like, the cats are dressed in these little suits, or like, there's different licenses based on the different silly cats. And
There's even a video game.
They say things like license invalid if licked or something. Like, they have all these little cat. I don't know. We'll put some pictures on our Instagram or something. Or you can go to nameneko.com and see the chaos for yourself.
I think it's Namaneko is it's a kind of play on words in Japanese that the name sounds like "don't monkey with me."
Like, don't mess with me?
Yeah, and so it became this like catchphrase that kids really bought into.
Because Neko is cat.
Yeah, so there's this kind of like, apparently they're really popular with kind of quasi-juvenile delinquents, and it became this catchphrase that they would use.
Because some of the cats on the cards are like juvenile delinquent type cats.
Yeah,
there's one
there's
that
like,
we got in the pack where it's a couple of cats that are dressed in high school uniforms and they're smoking cigarettes in the bathroom.
Yeah. And apparently it was such a bad thing that there was a period in time where it was becoming an issue because police would pull people over and people would hand them a cat license. It was apparently this really, and it had some like mean phrase on it that says something about invalid if you get pulled over by an idiot. And so the people would hand it to the cop, and it was his cat license. But
it's rude.
Anyway, a news story about foreign idiots in Japan.
Oh, that's mean.
It is mean and not entirely true.
No, it's not all foreign people.
There's been a big PR spin, and if you're like kind of into Japanese, current culture, you've probably heard about this. But there's the issue with the Lawson Fuji, and you might have seen it. There's a really popular social media photo, and it's like a really pretty photo, and there's a Lawson in the foreground, and in the background is Mount Fuji. And this kind of blew up on social media, and it became this kind of mecca to go to take cool social media photos.
It's in Kawaguchiko, which is Fuji Kawaguchi Lake.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the town says that they've been so overrun and traumatized by foreigners coming to the town to take these social media photos that they've been desperately trying to keep them away. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where they decided they just have to take away Mount Fuji. So they're apparently erecting a giant tarp behind the Lawson so
which
you can't
like
see Mount Fuji.
Pettiest thing.
I know.
But so I sympathize with both sides. Like it's dumb that they're like, oh, the foreigners are ruining this, because it's not all foreigners. There's also internal tourism where just Japanese people are like, I want to see this. Yeah. And take pictures
and
there.
There's this interesting dichotomy in Japan almost constantly. And it was literally the same day that I read this news article on the website I was reading the news on, talking about the foreigners ruining Fuji. There was another article that was, I think, Yamanashi Prefecture, that they built a new overlook. And they're like, we really hope foreigners come to the prefecture to look at Mount Fuji. And there's this funny dichotomy that they desperately want you to come, but then sometimes it's like, no, not like that.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying because it's not all foreigners. Well, yeah. Because then I sympathize with the other side where it's like, it is too many people in a parking lot that's not built to just have people stand there and take pictures. And people are crossing the street. People are like illegally parking or like crowding the business across.
Kind of fun to think about the concept of illegally parking when you see people just park everywhere and then leave their cars with their hazard lights on.
They're parking across the street at I think it's a dentist.
Yeah, the poor dentist.
And so that is annoying when people are just trying to live and have a business. So
he said that his customers felt awkward trying to come to the dentistry because they had to fight through the crowds to get their teeth cleaned.
So that does seem really annoying.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because Lawson issued a statement, and then the Lawson itself said, or Lawson as a company, says that they deeply apologize to the local residents, store customers, and many other people who have been inconvenienced and troubled by the popularity of the Vantage Point.
Isn't that so dumb, though? Because
it's just a Lawson.
When they literally did nothing.
Yeah.
They're just a store. There just happens to be a gigantic mountain behind their store.
So Lawson isn't doing anything about it because they're just kind of like, sorry. I mean,
They're probably also making bank.
Probably because
people go in there and buy stuff.
Yeah, all publicity is good publicity, too.
Yeah.
But they've apparently dispatched more staff to be at this particular Lawson, to have more staff there. And then they're putting up signs in multiple languages reminding people not to jaywalk or to litter. But then the town is the one that's like, we're going to put up a tarp. They haven't put a tarp up because when I read this, I was thinking they were going to just erect some silly tarp behind the Lawson that was like, now you can't see the thing.
That was the plan.
Well, all they've done so far is erect a netting across the street to prevent people from jaywalking, which honestly does seem like a good idea. Like, keep people from running into the road and stuff,
Yeah.
But I feel like all of this talk about it has just made people want to go see it more.
Yeah, because now people know exactly where it is.
And people are live streaming, like, I'm here at this,
we're at the Lawson Fuji.
At the drama.
Yeah, because I had seen the photo before, but I had no idea where it was. And then I read this news article, and it told me exactly where to go to see that view. And I was kind of like, oh, that's where that famous photo's from.
I'll head there later.
Maybe we should go before they put the tarp up.
Yeah.
So now there's probably a crush because people are kind of like, oh, we got to get there before they put the tarp up.
I know. I hope that's not the case. It's just funny because I understand why it would be a cool photo where it's kind of two very Japanese things.
It's
one's very
iconic.
traditional, one's very modern, and you get them both in one photo. But also it's so silly because it's like, I don't want to go there when it's that crowded because it's just a photo of a convenience store with the mountain. There's so many cooler places to photograph the mountain. So it's funny that it's still popular.
Yeah, you could go to the view that Yamanashi Prefecture or whoever built and take a picture from there.
Yeah, there's literally
no Lawson
articles and videos about like top 20 best places to see Fuji.
I bet this is number 1.
The Lawson parking lot.
Yeah.
But one article was making fun of how, like, meanwhile, the hikers have made climbing Mount Fuji so popular that this summer they're going to be charged 2,000 yen each with numbers capped to ease congestion. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Like, why hasn't that been happening? That seems really cheap. 2,000 yen per person to climb Fuji.
Well, it's also a big issue because apparently they're blaming, again, people for bullet climbing Mount Fuji, that they're mad because people are climbing Mount Fuji too quickly.
Oh.
Because a lot of people, they make it their thing that they're like, I'm going to go up and down in a day, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I don't see the problem, I guess.
Apparently it's very dangerous, and people aren't prepared, and so they're trying to get their stuff together, but
I mean,
they're
if
having
you're
a
not,
tough time right now.
Like, physically, you know, if you haven't been training for that and you just decide to and then you become a liability, then yeah, that's negative.
Yeah, it's a complicated subject.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
We'll just sit over here in our armchairs, like really far away from Fuji. Just
I'm never going up Fuji.
Yeah, I've never been to Fuji.
Especially after I saw the lines that when you get to the summit, you're waiting in a line because there's so many people and everyone wants to take the same photo. And so leading up to the summit, there's also a picture of, I think it was one night where they allowed climbing on Fuji. And because everyone has headlamps, there's a photo taken from a distance and you can literally see a line going up the mountain that's lit. And it's because it's all the climbers waiting to go up the mountain.
It's hard because it does sound really cool. Like the idea of climbing Mount Fuji is appealing to me.
Yeah, but did you know that there are 2 other holy mountains? And there are 3 total in Japan, and you can come to Hakusan and there's no line. And you can do it in a day. In fact, it's encouraged. You can do it in about 9 hours.
Yeah, we're going to try to do that in July, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hakusan and then Takayama in Toyama Prefecture. Those are the other 2 holy mountains. But yeah, let us know if you climbed Mount Fuji. Let us know what it was like. I've seen Fuji from a distance, and it is beautiful. I've never been on it.
Anyway.
Oh.
Do you have a word of the week?
Moving on. Yeah, do you want to go first?
Nope.
Okay. Mine is Joshuseki, which means passenger seat in a car, but I wanted to mention it because I thought it was funny. I didn't realize this before, but it literally means assistant seat. And the kanji is assistant, joshu, and then seki is just seat. But I just think it's funny that you have the driver's seat and the assistant seat instead of the driver's seat and just the passenger seat. Yeah,
we were watching some kind of trashy Japanese show in the hotel, and they were explaining it comes kind of from back in the day where, you know, your car, you used to have to start the car, so someone would have to get out and they'd have to, almost like, you know, an airplane, they'd have to turn the thing in the engine to get the car going. Or when you were stopping, they might need to jump out and help you stop, and you put some blocks under the wheels.
Or they'd be like your navigator.
Yeah, so they were literally your assistant. And so that's, you know, you would have a passenger in the car and they would help you kind of run the vehicle.
But now you're just the passenger.
Yep.
What's your word then?
Mine is senshu.
Like last week?
Nope.
It is the same pronunciation, though.
Same pronunciation.
Okay, what's your senshu?
It's like athlete, or I think technically it's like player, but they often use it in an athletic setting.
Like a teammate?
No, like cyclists, they would call them senshu.
Oh.
So that's kind of like your title when you're in an athletic setting.
Is it any sport?
I think so. I know that specifically they were using it with cyclists, so they would point it out. It was kind of like the word for athlete.
Yeah.
Like it's a person that's playing a sport. But
Very cool.
That's
well, thanks for listening to our rambling again this week. And as always, you can email us to say hi or with any questions or let us know if we got something wrong. ramblingramswaffles@gmail.com.
Yeah, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Bye.